man, we're getting hungry, need something to eat, you know, we need to maybe go to the chow hall and see if we can get a bite to eat or whatever. But we were afraid to leave because we're afraid if we went to try and find some food, we'd miss out on a flight.
Sure.
So we just kind of stayed around there for hours and hours and starved. But eventually ended up loading onto a transport plane that went down to Chu Lai, and don't remember all of the process of getting set up down there. I remember they ended up assigning me to a hooch, which is basically, it's just kind of a little plywood shed that had some tin on the top for a roof, flaps on the side that you could open up and let air go through, or if you needed to get out quickly, you could just bail out the side there from where you were sleeping. And we had like foxholes or bunkers on each corner of the hooch. And they would assign me to one of those. Usually there was about a dozen of us that would be in each hooch. Gave me an army cot. There was a couple of sheets and a blanket. They didn't have any more pillowcases, so I just said, just stuff your shirts in a t-shirt and use that for a pillow. And they had an air mattress that they would issue to you that you could use to sleep on. But when I got down there, the guy said, don't bother blowing up the air mattress, because as soon as you do, somebody's going to sneak up there and let all the air out. So said the only thing the air mattress is good for is if you get a chance to go down to the beach, you can use it for a surfboard or something. You know? So that's basically what we did with the air mattress. But yeah, that was it was pretty rustic living there. It was kind of a sandy type of soil, similar to what you see in southern Utah with the red sand and whatever. And the hooch I was on was actually right on the end of a group of them that was right off the other side was the beach. So I was just right close to the beach. And so it was just a hop, skip, and a jump down to the beach. Although there was people who said, well, we've had attacks come in from the water too. They had some what they called sappers try to infiltrate the base and throw satchel charges under airplanes up on the flight line there. Then they figured they entered from the beach, and they did have guard stations out along the beach there. And I'm thinking, well, we're awful close to the water there, so you know, we're pretty close to the beach if they attack from that direction.
Sure.
But that was quite an ordeal. Sidewalks, we basically, instead of walking in the sand, they would just take wooden pallets and stack them up along that you could kind of use for a boardwalk or something to hike around. And usually those things had all kinds of critters that would live under there, like lizards and snakes and rats and all this kind of stuff that was kind of interesting, some of the wildlife. But yep, that was my introduction to Chu Lai.
What became your daily routine?
We would usually work about 16 hours a day. We would overlap with different crews. We'd have night crews and day crews, and then we'd overlap. You'd pretty much work every day. If you could, you'd end up maybe having a free day about once a month that you could, do something else. There was a coral reef that was just up the beach a little ways from where my hooch was, and they had some snorkel masts and some snorkel equipment. And that was my favorite thing to do if I was off duty, is I'd go up there and go off and snorkel around on the coral reef there. And they had beautiful sea life there. There were known to be sea snakes around that you had to avoid. There were sharks in the area too, and things like that you had to be a little careful of. But that was something that was pleasurable. I really enjoyed that. They even had a few surfboards there that you could try out. I didn't have much luck with surfboard, but that was something that you could do in your off hours, which you didn't get really an awful lot of. Even after you got off work and you tried to sleep in the hooch, it was jets, helicopters, all kinds of noise. I mean, it was just a racket all the time. So eventually you would learn how to sleep through some of that.
What aircraft were based in Chulai?
I was in VMA 311. We had A4, well, I started out with A4C Skyhawks. It's they used them a lot on aircraft carriers, and the Marine Corps used them a lot as close air support attack bombers. We flew a lot of close air support missions. They had an operation that was right south of the base they called Operation Starlight, where they knew they had a bunch of Viet Cong tunnels and stuff. It was almost like an ant bed down just south of the base that they would try to clear out, and so a lot of the aircraft was used for this close air support. They'd also, I'd see them up in the mountain range that was just west of our base. I'd see them out there. I mean, they'd no sooner take off, and then they were out there doing bombing missions and close air support with troops out there in the mountains. We'd also fly missions to up around the DMZ, up into North Vietnam. That was up into in the southernmost part of North Vietnam. We very seldom ever sent missions up farther into North Vietnam. That was mostly Navy and Air Force people would cover that. About halfway through my stint there I might mention too, my specific job there, they assigned me to be what they called a plane captain, and that was basically flight line work. In the Air Force, they refer to him usually as a crew chief. I wasn't a pilot, but I was assigned aircraft. In fact, a lot of times they'd put your name on a specific aircraft, and you were in charge of that aircraft. Although usually you would have to work on all of the aircraft in the squadron. There was usually 20 or so aircraft. And plane captain basically prepares it for flight. You get it refueled, you do a pre-flight inspection, you do all the mechanical work as far as working on the landing gear, the engine, all the various things that you need to do to keep that aircraft airworthy. You'd sometimes help the ordnance people load the bombs and the ordnance rockets, missiles, napalm, all those different things on the aircraft. Then when the pilot and you'd pre-flight the aircraft, fill out a form that the pilot would use when he would accept the aircraft to take off and use it on a mission. You would escort the pilot out to the aircraft, strap him into the ejection seat, connect his oxygen hose, get him ready, usually get his helmet and everything all set up and get him prepped to take off. Then you would, we had ground equipment that would actually start the aircraft. We'd have to hook up big air hose onto the starter that they would use to turn up the aircraft and get it started, and connect electrical power, ground power to the aircraft to get it started. Then we'd go through flight control checks with the pilot, usually using hand signals because we didn't have an intercom system on that particular airplane at the time. So we'd go through a series of hand signals to get him ready to launch. Then when he's ready to take off and launch, we'd taxi him out onto the taxiway and then send him off on his mission. And then we'd do, after he came back from the mission, we would recover the aircraft and just more or less do the opposite. Take it in, inspect it, talk to the pilot, debrief him on any problems mechanically with the airplane.
So what were the most common issues that you found with the planes?
Oh, well, some of them had a bad habit of, well, usually they'd get chewed out if they did it, but sometimes when they'd come in and land, they would not release the brakes on the pedals, and they'd land and they'd scalp the tires. So you do not have your feet on the brakes when you touch down on the tires. You wipe out the tires. Of course, we had all the various things. We had engine issues sometimes, landing gear. Of course, they could come back sometimes shot up too. But usually we had sheet metal people that would patch up the sheet metal or the skin of the aircraft if they were shot up. Had one pilot come back and he was sweating profusely because he had a bullet hole up through just right underneath the canopy, the cockpit, where it hit the air conditioning system that would either air condition or heat the cockpit. And it was super hot in there because I guess the bullet had done some damage down there, but he was lucky at least it didn't go in and get him. Had some that come back where the bullet, he'd actually be looking through his gun sight on a attack run, and the bullet came through the canopy and went right into the back of the ejection seat and things like that. You know, there was some pretty interesting wounds that some of those aircraft come back with. But
Did you lose any pilots?
there was 3 pilots that were killed just about the time there was some just prior to me getting there. There was a pilot that they lost about the time I was arriving to the squadron that they were all talking about, but I didn't actually know this pilot. But he was actually shot down or on an attack run, or on a bombing run, if I remember the story correctly. And he ejected successfully out of the aircraft with the ejection seat, and the rescue helicopter was trying to pick him up, and he had the enemy right on his tail, I guess, to the point where he wasn't able to attach himself to the rescue cable or rope or whatever properly. He was in such a hurry to get off the ground and get out of there that when they tried to hoist him up into the helicopter on the rescue, he fell off and was killed. So they lost, let's see, what was his name? I can't bring it, I can't think of it right now, but anyway, yeah, that was an unfortunate situation. My time there with that squadron, I don't believe we lost any that I know of, although we did have some pilots that transferred into different aircraft. I know there was one pilot that I was quite friendly with, Lieutenant Mee. He wasn't too much old. I was only like 19, but he was just a young, I guess mid-20s or something like that. Really liked the guy. He was really friendly. But, and he was a good pilot, but he was transferring over to a squadron of what they call forward air controllers, where they was going to fly I think it was the 01A Bird Dog or an 02 Bird Dog. It's basically a small aircraft like a little Cessna. And their job is to get right at treetop level, go in, find enemy, and control the big jets that's going to attack them. They're the forward air controller. They would find a target, mark it with a smoke rocket so that the big jets could see where they were supposed to drop their bombs or where they were supposed to attack, and then he would coordinate their attack and tell them best place to exit the bomb run and all the various things. He'd have several different radios where he was in contact with them. But this was a very dangerous mission or occupation. And I often wondered, I wonder if old Lieutenant Mee is going to survive this thing. And I know later on, I never did ever see him again, but later on I know he was from Michigan. And so I looked on the internet to see if I could see anyone by that name in the Michigan area. And I believe I did come up with something there that I think was probably him, that was still alive and still living in Michigan. Okay. So I never did ever get a chance to meet with him again, but I think he survived. Okay. But from what I hear, that those Bird Dog aircraft, I think during the Vietnam War, they lost somewhere